The following portion of Daytime Tri-Cities is sponsored by Food City.
Well, I will bet that I know some of the things that are in your refrigerator right now. And I know because they're in my refrigerator too. Of course, the day after Thanksgiving, we all have tons of leftovers. And here to help us use them wisely is registered dietitian Dr. Elizabeth Hall with Food City. Good morning. Well, I am definitely thinking on this day after Thanksgiving, everybody's refrigerator is full of dishes that have been covered up with the saran wrap and they're all ready for the next day, right?
Yes, you know, I'm a big fan of leftovers. It can kind of help you enjoy the holiday, even days after the day itself, right?
Absolutely. So you've got some tips, first of all, to help us store everything properly.
Yes, that's the first thing you should think about when it comes to leftovers is food safety. And a lot of times we don't think about that. We just think about how yummy all the food tastes, but we want to make sure that we're keeping it safe as well. So we're going to start off with storage. So you've already stored most of your leftovers, right? But every time you get it out, you need to make sure to put it back in the refrigerator promptly. I know if it's anything like at my house, when one person gets out the leftovers, it's like everyone wants to partake, right? So it might be sitting out for a few minutes or so, but you definitely want to refrigerate it within 2 hours. So because that's more likely to cause those microorganisms that can make us sick grow in the food if they're sitting out at room temperature for longer than 2 hours. So definitely refrigerate that promptly. You know, use the proper storing mechanisms if you can, from your glass storing or plastic storing dishes and containers, or even a plastic bag or freezer bag, things like that. You want to keep that air out too. That's going to keep it lasting longer for you. So in the refrigerator, 3 to 4 days is usually the rule of thumb for leftovers. That means on Monday, right, you got to decide, are we going to eat this or should we go ahead and stick that in the freezer? Because in the freezer, it can typically last a little bit longer, 3 to 4 months. So think about that. Think about if you're going to eat it. If you're not, go ahead and stick it in the freezer. And next, we want to make sure we're reheating safely. So I have my food thermometer here. I don't know, you probably can't see it. It's a tiny one. But we want to make sure that all of our leftovers, no matter how we're using them, are heated to 165 degrees. So you could do this in the microwave, in the oven, or on the stove, however you're cooking your leftovers, but you want to make sure it's reheated to that proper temperature. You also want to make sure if you are freezing your leftovers that you're thawing them properly. So you can thaw again during cooking, you could thaw in the refrigerator, but you want to avoid keeping your leftovers out at room temperature, on your counter to thaw. That's not the best way to thaw because it can increase those microorganisms again in the food. So make sure to thaw safely as well. And now for the fun part, all the creative ways that you can use your leftovers. So I brought some examples of what I'm planning to possibly do this year depending on what we have left over. So first I'll start with my soup recipe here. So maybe you're out shopping today and getting back into your home with a nice hot cup of soup. Sounds really tasty and comforting. And so this is actually a soup that uses leftover turkey or ham, depending on what you have on hand. I also added lots of veggies into this: potatoes, broccoli, carrot, celery, the works. And this is a great way to enjoy some of that leftover entree that you may have on hand. Next here, I actually have a flatbread pizza. So I made this crust from scratch, but you could always buy one at the store and have it ready to go. This is actually how I use my leftover cranberry sauce. So I have some prosciutto on here, topped it with some arugula, and even made a balsamic vinegar glaze that goes on top. So talk about fancy. This is a great way to enjoy your leftover cranberry sauce. Let's talk about stuffing really quick, or dressing, depending on what you call it and where you're from. This is a great thing to use in baked goods. I have some savory scones up here that you can make. It has some cheddar cheese in there, some fresh herbs. So a delicious way to enjoy perhaps for brunch one day, your leftover stuffing. I also have a veggie burger that I actually used my extra stuffing and I added in some black beans, some other veggies like spinach or my red pepper there to give it some color. And this is a great way, again, that stuffing kind of adds that thickness that you need in a veggie burger, a great way to enjoy your leftover stuffing. And then last but not least on the end there, You know, sometimes when I'm making my pumpkin pie, I have a little bit of pumpkin left over in the can, or maybe you have leftover sweet potato casserole or something like that. These go great in baked goods. You can actually use them as a substitute for fat in your recipes, so that can add lots of great flavor and texture without having to add additional fat to your recipe. So there, I actually have some mini sandwich cookies, not too sweet, made with whole wheat flour to add extra fiber. You could also make this into a muffin recipe. I think I've done that on the show before too. So lots of different ways to enjoy those leftovers creatively and safely.
Oh my goodness, Elizabeth, that is some great information, and I love the dressing scones. Never thought of that.
Yes, these are delicious too. I was thinking about, I might actually make them into a sandwich too later with some leftover ham and cheese or something like that. So these are great not only to eat as is, but even as a sandwich.
You're brilliant. I love it. Thank you, Dr. Elizabeth Hall. I hope you had a nice Thanksgiving, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Amy.
All right, for all these recipes and more information, you can always check out the website, foodcity.com.